It tells us that the Chinese Communist Party, after deciding to put Australia through a punitive phase, once realised that that wasn't working, it was in fact backfiring, because rather than Australia capitulating to Beijing's demands, Australia was in fact intensifying its relationship with the US, with Japan, with India and with other regional countries. The ultimate evidence of which, of course, was the AUKUS submarine deal with the US and Britain. The Beijing's decision was, well, that's not working, very pragmatically decided to try another path to influencing Australia. So hence you get, in response, the pretext for the change was a change of government in Canberra. The Albanese government allows China the pretext to say, well, we can now improve relations, and the Albanese government has been fairly cautious, has welcomed the improvement in relations without undoing any of the policy steps that had made Beijing upset in the first place. And so we see a gradual rapprochement. It's still very much only partly accomplished. The two countries remain strategically very far apart, with the US obviously as the Australian chief ally and China with its own ambitions for regional dominance. But if the government is aiming towards stabilisation, it looks in the short term at least, short term I emphasise, that it is stabilising.
How significant are the economic, issues, the tariffs that might be finally removed? Of course, China's economy is not as strong and dominant as it once was.
Yeah, so there's two big points there, Bev. The first is that the $20 billion worth of political sanctions which were applied to the Australian economy to try to bend Australia to China's will have been eased off in part. Three remain on three different industries. More than $1 billion a year worth of lost exports to the Australian wine industry. The Chinese side has given the impression that those tariffs are about to be lifted imminently. And then there's also some beef that's shut out of the Chinese market as part of those that same brace of punitive measures, and also Australian lobsters. So that trade has yet to be restored. The expectation is that this visit by Wang Yi, China's Foreign Minister, will create the pathway to resolving those three. But the larger point is, as you say, Bev, China's 30 years of the fastest growth in the world during its time, that's finished. And China is now in a new, slower phase. Its stock market is its lowest in 5 years. It's in a deep and enduring real estate slump. It's no longer the dynamic engine that it was, and that not only gives Australia pause to reconsider just how much premium to put on the Chinese market, it also gives Australia the need as well as opportunity to divest, to diversify its range of export markets.
Yeah, not have that reliance. Well, the economic relationship might be on the improve. There are other contentious issues other than strategic ones for the two governments, not least of which is China's arbitrary detention and imprisonment of not only its own citizens, but foreign nationals as well.
Yes, there's an Australian citizen, Yang Hengjun, who is in a Beijing prison as we speak, recently sentenced to death with a 2-year stay of execution in a Beijing court. The Australian government, one of the main themes of conversation with Wang Yi is expected to be Penny Wong's attempts to persuade the Chinese government to grant him some sort of at least better treatment. He's in a very bad way medically, but also to see if they will ease the penalty and allow him ultimately to live and to leave. But it's also unfortunate. It's a sort of metaphor for where China has Australia in the relationship at the moment. They're holding Yang Hengjun as a literal hostage. He's absolutely a political detainee. But they're also holding those trade items hostage to the relationship and to Australia's conduct. They're also holding hostage the prospect of a visit by China's President Xi Jinping, which will be discussed during this visit this week. The Chinese are holding that out as a prospect, like a diplomatic gift, if you like, that if Australia behaves, we'll give you this trip. And the Albanese government would love to be seen to be engineering the full restoration of bilateral relations in a way that eluded the Morrison government. So China is holding all of those hostages, political, metaphorical, as well as literal hostages over Australia at the moment.
Yeah. We spoke last week about the potential unreliability of the US as an ally. Now, this would be a narrative that China would be very quick to exploit if that did happen, say if Trump were re-elected and they didn't honour some of the agreements. You know, because there is this ongoing narrative of theirs that we are very still much shackled to our colonial masters.
Yes, there's a number of phrases and key metaphors. Xi Jinping, the president, is very fond of saying the East is rising and the West is declining. That's big picture, civilizational talk, but he also likes to say one of the Chinese talking points is that Australia has to shed its Cold War mentality, is the phrase, Cold War mentality. In other words, you guys have got to get over your fetish about the US alliance, and you've got to get more realistic, and you've got to deal, you've got to transfer your allegiance elsewhere, of course, meaning to Beijing. And Wang Yi, no coincidence, has made a point of seeking out a meeting with Paul Keating, former Australian Prime Minister, who's also Australia's leading apologist for the Chinese Communist Party. And that meeting, neither of them have to say anything. The mere fact of the meeting will accentuate in itself the fact that there is a significant source of dissent within the Australian Labor Party over Australian foreign policy. Keating is highly dismissive of the US alliance and constantly criticises Penny Wong for daring to, just a couple of weeks ago, criticise the Foreign Minister for rattling the China can, trying to frighten Australians about the Chinese Communist Party. So by meeting Keating, Wang Yi will be highlighting that source of dissent.
Always good to get your analysis, Pete. Thanks so much.
Pleasure, Bev.